so many ways to use them, and I like rock and roll. I like all kind of music, so.
For one single yesterday, holding Bobby's body.
Willie Nelson isn't just a country music legend. He is a living monument to pain, perseverance, and poetic rebellion. He once gave us On the Road Again, a song that captured the spirit of wanderers, the ache of endless highways, and the beauty of a soul always moving forward. But behind that warm melody lies a man who has weathered storms far greater than most could imagine. For over 7 decades, he has stood unshaken through betrayal, collapse, and unspeakable loss, turning every scar into a song that stitched itself into the hearts of millions. He didn't merely survive. He turned disgrace into dignity, silence into anthems, and grief into grace. Now at 92, while most would choose to rest, Willie still faces storms with a quiet strength and a fire that refuses to fade. But behind the calm smile lies a weight few could understand. And the final years of his journey may hold truths more haunting than ever before. Don't look away, because what he's still enduring might just reveal the most powerful chapter of all. And if his voice has ever stirred something inside you, leave a like below as a tribute to a man who gave the world everything and still hasn't stopped giving. Some hearts are born with cracks too wide for childhood to fill. Picture this: a little boy in dusty Abbott, Texas, abandoned by both parents before he could even walk properly, clutching a guitar like it was the only thing keeping him alive. That boy was Willie Nelson, and his story will absolutely blow your mind because it's proof that sometimes the most incredible legends are born from the darkest places. Born in 1933 during the Great Depression, Willie's mom just vanished one day like smoke in the wind. No goodbye, no explanation, no looking back, just gone forever. His dad couldn't handle raising 2 kids alone, so he remarried and basically disappeared from their lives too, leaving Willie and his sister Bobby with their grandparents, who had hearts bigger than their wallets, but barely enough money to keep food on the table. The only real father figure Willie ever knew was his grandfather, a tough-as-nails blacksmith with calloused hands who worked all day at his forge, but still found time to put that first beat-up guitar in Willie's tiny 6-year-old hands and teach him his first chords. But just when Willie started feeling like maybe he belonged somewhere, tragedy struck again. Pneumonia swept through their small town and took his grandfather away, leaving this little boy completely shattered and wondering why everyone he loved kept disappearing. While other kids his age were playing with marbles and chasing fireflies, 7-year-old Willie was already performing in smoky honky-tonk bars and local church gatherings, not because he dreamed of fame, but because music was literally the only thing keeping him from drowning in a sea of abandonment and loneliness that would have destroyed most adults. By the time he hit his teens, this kid had already lived 3 lifetimes worth of hardship and worked more back-breaking jobs than most people do in their entire lives, picking cotton in the blazing Texas heat until his small fingers were raw and bleeding, climbing telephone poles as a tree trimmer, bouncing drunk cowboys twice his size out of rowdy nightclubs, working as a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman, trying to convince families who couldn't even afford shoes to buy expensive books, spinning records as a small-town radio DJ, and even teaching Sunday school just to make ends meet.
They expected big production, full orchestras, the kind of polished sound that filled up radio waves. But instead, Willie gave them something that sounded like it was recorded around a campfire, with long silences between songs and a haunting, ghostly quality that seemed to whisper directly into your soul. The label thought it was commercial suicide and tried to talk him out of releasing it, but Willie refused to budge, and that strange, beautiful album didn't just succeed. It went multi-platinum and became one of the most influential country records ever made, proving that sometimes the most powerful music comes from the quietest places. That same year, Willie joined forces with other Nashville outcasts like Waylon Jennings, Jesse Coulter, and Tomple Glazer to create Wanted. The Outlaws, which became the first country album in history to go platinum and officially launched the outlaw country movement that would change music forever. Suddenly, the man who'd been told for decades that he was too weird, too rough, too real became the face of a revolution that said you don't have to fit into someone else's idea of what a country singer should look like or sound like. You just have to be yourself, even if that self is scarred, and weathered and doesn't look anything like the guys on magazine covers. Willie wasn't just making music anymore. He was giving permission to every misfit, dreamer, and drifter who'd ever been told they didn't belong, proving that sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the deepest pain, and that refusing to change who you are might just be the most powerful thing you do in a world that's constantly trying to make you into someone else. But just when Willie thought he'd weathered every storm life could throw at him, the biggest one was yet to come, and this time it arrived not with fire or heartbreak, but in the form of a cold, official letter that would make his previous struggles look like warm-up acts. By the dawn of the 1990s, Willie Nelson had already done the impossible. He'd risen from ashes, built his own stage, redefined country music, and become an icon of outlaw soul. But just when the world believed he'd made it through every storm, another one came crashing down that was bigger and more devastating than anything he'd faced before. This time it didn't come with flames or broken hearts. It came in the form of a letter, so cold and official it might as well have been a death sentence, because the IRS was demanding $16.7 million in unpaid taxes, a sum so astronomical it could have bought entire towns in Texas. Years of financial mismanagement, bad advisors who were supposed to protect him but instead betrayed his trust, and Willie's own generous, trusting nature had caught up with him the cruelest way possible, and in an instant, everything he had rebuilt from the ashes of his earlier life was gone again. Seized by federal agents who raided his home, he was some kind of criminal instead of a music legend who'd given his heart and soul to America. Those agents didn't just take his money. They seized his prized recording equipment, his studio where he'd poured out his soul for decades, his memorabilia that told the story of his incredible journey, and most heartbreakingly of all, they took Trigger, his beloved guitar that had been his constant companion through every triumph and tragedy. The battered Martin & 20 that was more like a limb than an instrument, for a man who had already lost so much in life, his parents, his grandfather, his first home to fire, multiple marriages. Watching federal agents box up his entire life's work and carry it out the door was the kind of gut punch that could have finished anyone. But Willie Nelson had spent his entire life proving that he wasn't just anyone. Instead of hiding in shame or declaring bankruptcy like most people would have done, he got to work doing what he had always done when the world knocked him down. He made music, but this time it wasn't for the charts or the critics. It was literally for survival, a desperate attempt to sing his way out of the deepest hole he'd ever fallen into. In 1992, with nothing but a stripped-down studio and his weathered voice that had carried him through every other crisis, he recorded an album called The IRS Tapes, Hauled by My Memories, a raw, honest, heartbreaking collection of songs that was essentially Willie auctioning off his past to buy back his future, selling his memories and his pain directly to the American people through late-night infomercials that showed this country legend humbly asking for help. The concept was simple but devastating. A man singing his story, offering up his past to pay for a chance at tomorrow, with no glitz, no fancy production, just pure pain transformed into melody and broadcast to anyone willing to listen. And then something absolutely remarkable happened that proves the power of genuine human connection over corporate marketing. America didn't just listen. They responded with their hearts and their wallets, not out of pity, but out of love for a man whose songs had carried them through their own darkest nights. And now they had a chance to carry him through his. Fans old and new rallied behind him. He was family, buying the album not because they felt sorry for him, but because they remembered every time his voice had been there for them when nobody else was. And now they could give back to the man who had given them so much. Little by little, dollar by dollar, Willie chipped away at that mountain of debt, refusing to take the easy way out through bankruptcy court, instead standing naked before his audience and singing his truth, while they answered with the kind of loyalty that money can't buy and publicists can't fake. By the mid-90s, most of that crushing debt was paid off through sheer determination and the love of his fans. He got his precious trigger back. He reclaimed his dignity. And more than that, he reminded the world again that resilience isn't about never falling down. It's about how you choose to get back up. And Willie always chose to get back up singing. For most artists, the IRS tapes would have been a sad footnote, a career-ending embarrassment. But for Willie, they were just another chapter in a story that refused to end. Proof that a man brought to his knees could find a microphone and stand back up stronger than before. But even as Willie was rebuilding his financial life and proving his incredible resilience to the world, the personal losses kept coming like waves that never stopped crashing against his soul. And the deepest cuts weren't from business failures or government seizures. They were from the empty chairs at family gatherings and the voices he'd never hear harmonizing with his again. Even legends bleed in silence. And for Willie Nelson, the most devastating wounds came not from failure or rejection, but from the faces he could never see again, the voices that had been silenced forever, while his own somehow kept going. It was Christmas Day 1991, when time stopped, and Willie's world shattered in a way that no amount of success or money could ever repair. While millions of families were lighting candles, opening gifts, and embracing their loved ones, Willie received a phone call that destroyed something irreparable inside him. His firstborn son Willie Nelson had passed away under heartbreaking circumstances, and in Willie's own simple but devastating words, he'd never experienced anything so crushing in his entire life of struggles and heartbreak. Willie had been working on a gospel album, pouring his faith and fragility into music, just like his father had always done. But behind closed doors, he was fighting demons that even Willie's unconditional love couldn't conquer. And when that fight finally ended, it left Willie with a father's grief so deep and so permanent that no song could ever fully express it. There are no melodies for that kind of pain, no lyrics that can capture the silence left when your child's voice goes quiet forever. And 4 years afterward, every note Willie strummed carried an echo of Willie's voice, a memory that would never be finished, a conversation that would never be completed. Every Christmas since became a reminder of loss rather than celebration. And behind all the lights and laughter there lived a father's ache that was quiet but absolutely unrelenting, a wound dressed in music but never truly healed. He stopped playing Christmas shows for a while, and when he finally returned to performing during the holidays, fans said they could hear it in his voice, a weight behind each lyric, a quiet pause where there never used to be one, and that empty chair at every family gathering that still sits there today, a permanent reminder of the son who should have been there to carry on the Nelson legacy. Then came February 2020, just as the world was beginning to whisper about a virus that would change everything. But Willie was already bracing for a different kind of loss that had been circling him for decades, like a vulture waiting for its moment. Paul English, his drummer, bodyguard, outlaw companion, and brother in spirit for over 40 years, passed away at the age of 87, taking with him just incredible musical talent, but a piece of Willie's soul that could never be replaced. Paul wasn't just a bandmate or employee. He was family in the truest sense, the kind of loyalty and friendship that's rarer than platinum records or sold-out stadiums. They first met way back in 1955, when Willie was still sleeping in cars and playing for pocket change, barely scraping by but refusing to give up on his dreams. And Paul showed up claiming he could drum with nothing but a pair of paintbrushes and a cardboard box for equipment. Somehow he made it work, and for the next 45 years, through bar fights and empty wallets, endless highways and sold-out arenas, through every triumph and disaster, Paul was there like a rock-solid foundation that Willie could always count on. Paul wasn't just keeping time on the drums, he was keeping Willie's entire chaotic world together, serving as bodyguard when things got rough, settling scores when people tried to take advantage, sometimes collecting debts with a pistol in his boot. But more than anything else, he was Willie's anchor in the madness of fame and fortune. Willie once said about Paul, "If I hadn't gone with Willie, I'd be in the penitentiary or dead." And it wasn't a joke. Paul was the kind of man who didn't flinch in chaos, who could stop an argument with just a look, who kept the family together when everything else was falling apart. When bandmates argued or tensions rose, Paul didn't need to speak. He would just give one of his famous looks and silence would fall like a curtain. After Paul's death, Willie's daughter Amy called him the co-patriarch of their family, because he wasn't just keeping rhythm in the band, he was keeping the entire Nelson family in harmony. When that steady beat finally stopped, something fundamental in Willie's world fell silent too. And though the band kept playing, Willie knew that something irreplaceable was missing from the rhythm, something that could only be remembered, never replaced. 2 years later in 2022, that silence deepened even more when his sister Bobby Nelson passed away. And this loss hit differently because Bobby wasn't just Willie's sibling. She was his first duet partner, his lifelong musical shadow, his connection to a childhood that nobody else remembered or understood. Together they had been raised by their poor but loving grandparents after being abandoned by both parents. And it was Bobby who had stood beside him at the family piano during those early years, who had played on his very first records when nobody else believed in his sound, who knew every scar Willie carried because she had been there to see exactly how each one was earned. They had co-authored a book together called Me and Sister Bobby, which was essentially a love letter to resilience, family, and the power of music to heal even the deepest wounds. And in that book Willie wrote with heartbreaking honesty, "Without my sister, I'd never be where I am today. I've always needed her." When Bobby died, it wasn't just a loss of family. It was the collapse of a bridge to everything Willie used to be, because she wasn't just part of his music. She was part of his memory, a living witness to the years that nobody else remembered, the keeper of stories and secrets that died with her. Willie didn't just lose a sister when Bobby left. He lost his historian, his witness, the one person who could verify that his incredible journey had actually happened the way he remembered it. He still plays her favorite songs at concerts, but he plays them slower now, as if he's waiting for a harmony that will never come, hoping to hear her voice in the echo of his own, carrying on conversations with a ghost who used to sit right beside him at the piano. And then, as if fate wasn't finished testing Willie's ability to endure loss, came the final devastating blow in September 2024 when Chris Christopherson, Willie's brother-in-arms, fellow highwayman and sole confidant, passed away at 88 years old, completing Willie's transformation from outlaw legend to the last man standing among giants. Their friendship wasn't just professional collaboration or convenient partnership. It was cosmic connection between two poets who refused to be polished by the music industry, to brilliant misfits who understood each other's pain and shared the same rebellious spirit that said authenticity matters more than commercial success. Chris was the Harvard-educated Rhodes Scholar who chose to sweep floors in Nashville just to get his songs heard, while Willie was the Texas drifter who turned a lifetime of pain into poetry that touched millions of hearts, and together they were misfits perfectly made for each other. Along with Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, they had formed the Highwaymen, a supergroup of rebels who didn't just sing about freedom and authenticity. They lived it every single day, sharing stages and roads, backstage jokes and bad hotels, the quiet moments before the curtain rose and the wild celebrations after it fell. They were more than bandmates or collaborators. They were brothers who understood the weight of carrying other people's dreams and expectations while trying to stay true to their own vision. After Chris passed, Willie said with typical understatement, "He left a lot of fantastic songs around for the rest of us to sing. I hated to lose him." But anyone who knew Willie could hear the deeper pain beneath those simple words, because it wasn't just about losing songs. It was about losing the last voice that truly understood his own artistic soul. With Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, and now Chris Christopherson all gone, Willie stood alone as the final highwayman, the last survivor of a brotherhood that had changed country music forever, carrying not just his own memories, but theirs too, like echoes that would never fade from his performances. Fans might see Willie's signature braids and gentle smile, and think nothing has changed over the decades. But when you look closely at recent photos and performances, you can see it clearly. A flicker of weariness in his eyes, a weight in his shoulders, the quiet exhaustion of a man who has seen too many sunsets with one less friend standing beside him. And so now at 92, when Willie Nelson takes the stage anywhere in the world, something fundamental is missing from the picture. Or rather, many things are missing that can never be replaced. He still smiles with that warm, genuine charm that made him famous. He still strums trigger with the same gentle precision that has captivated audiences for decades. He still performs with the authentic grace that separates true artists from mere entertainers. But behind that calm, weathered warmth stands a man walking through a graveyard of memories every time he steps into the spotlight. The crowd sees a living legend, an icon who has survived everything life could throw at him. But on that stage stands a father without his beloved son, a brother without his lifelong musical partner, a band leader without his steady, dependable beat, and a poet without his fellow travelers who understood the weight of words and the power of authentic expression. They say time heals all wounds, but Willie Nelson's story proves that some wounds don't heal, they simply learn how to sing. And somehow Willie still does exactly that with every performance, every album, every quiet moment when he picks up his guitar and lets the music flow. He doesn't wail or collapse under the weight of all this loss. He doesn't rage against the unfairness of watching everyone he loves disappear one by one. He does what he has always done since he was a 6-year-old boy trying to fill the silence left by absent parents. He turns grief into melody, transforms sorrow into verses that somehow make sense of senseless loss. And as long as there is breath in his weathered body, there will be songs that serve as conversations with ghosts, prayers offered through carefully chosen chords, and proof that love truly does outlive the physical bodies that house it.